Around 39 years ago, just a little while after the tragedy that happened on Chav Zayin Sivan the year before. So the year was Tovshin Lamed Ches, 1978, and in those years the Rebbe did not farbring every Shabbos. So after davening in the weeks when there was no farbringen, the Rebbe approximately, it was never really a set time, but approximately like an hour or so after davening, the Rebbe would walk home to President Street from 770. That particular Shabbos was Pasha Pinchas, Tov Shalom Ches, and it was a very hot day. So there were children playing outside, as usual, in front of 770. And as the Rebbe was walking down the steps and making the left to walk down Eastern Parkway, one of the children ran over to the Rebbe, not recognizing and thinking it was his father. Children don't always look up. They just look at their legs. So he saw an adult walking, so he ran over, and he took the Rebbe's hand.
Wow.
And then, because it was a hot day, he took the Rebbe's kapota, which went all the way down, and wiped his forehead with it. The mother of this child was standing on Eastern Parkway across the street and was watching the whole thing happening. And she was like mortified. But what could she do? I don't know how long it lasted, but another minute or two, then the little boy realized it's not his father. So he just scampered off, and that was that. But that night, right after Shabbos, so this woman couldn't wait to write a note to the Rebbe, actually apologizing for causing the Rebbe tsar. And I'm going to read to you the answer that the Rebbe sent her. She wrote, "Ani mitzta'eret. I have great pain for causing the Rebbe's agmas nefesh, this aggravation of my son not realizing whose hand he was holding and wiping his forehead on the Rebbe's kapota." Here's the exact lashon of the Rebbe. We know who this is, by the way. This is not just... the Rebbe wrote, on the words, "Ani mitzta'eret," where she wrote, "I have pain, I am anguished," or however you translate mitzta'eret, the Rebbe circled the word and made a question mark and a exclamation point, meaning wondering what kind of statement is that. And then the Rebbe wrote, "Hari adarabbe," and I'll translate. On the contrary, Geirem nachas ruach, he caused nachas ruach, great pleasure. Underlined nachas ruach, ayidei zeh. This child caused me great pleasure. Ki ein l'shayir, and the Rebbe again underlines ein l'shayir. You cannot estimate. You can't estimate. Geidel halavavius, the great heartfeltness, va'apashtus, and innocence, or simplicity, va'atmimus, and innocence, va'amitius, and truth, shel yeled, of a child. So 4 things: halavavius, pashtus, tmimus, and amitius of a child. Halavai me'ein zeh bigdelin. May it be that to be something similar like this by adults. It's not over. The Rebbe continues, Ubefrat al pi hamavur bedach b'zeh, and specifically according to what's explained in Chassidus about this. Then the Rebbe continues another paragraph, and he says, Ubeyeser, and this is increasingly emphasized. It's a loose translation, as good as I can do here. Sheba behemshech v'chesem hafteira be'eseh hayem. That this event took place not much after davening, which included the hemshech, the continuation of chesem, and the conclusion of the hafteira that the Rebbe said that day. And what did it say in that day's hafteira, meaning Pasha Pinchas, right before this event happened? Beged la'inyan b'chesed nurayich, in the greatness of the chesed that Hashem bestows on His children, nurayich, children. And the Rebbe then concludes, V'yagdilu v'chol yetzich letzeyam sheyichu l'teira l'chupa u'maisim tevim v'askar l'tziyin. And you should raise him and all your children l'teira chupa u'maisim tevim. And then askar l'tziyin, as the Rebbe always concluded his notes. I don't know if any of you ever heard this story before. You have to always leave people guessing. You'll do your homework and you'll figure it out. Maybe I'll drop some hints throughout the talk. Keep your attention. I told the story once, Sukkis in my Sukkah. I heard the story, but I never knew the answer from the Rebbe. I knew the general story that the Rebbe said it was Geirem Nachas Ruach and Alavai by Gdelim, etc. And in the Sukkah, and I kid you not, was sitting the brother of this guy and said to me, that happened with my brother. So I said, really? And was the answer Balpeh or was Biksav? Did the Rebbe say it or wrote? He said, he wrote it, and my mother has the answer. So I said, please send it to me. And the next day he sent me an email after Chalamed that had the answer, and here's the answer. Now, I think it speaks for itself, but you don't always have this elaboration, the Rebbe's view on children in general. And being that we're here, literally the 40th year of, on one hand, such a sad day, but on the other hand, how it was transformed, as Rabbi Butman just so eloquently elaborated on the thousands and thousands of children that have benefited, and the Keren, Avrohom Eliezer, that the Rebbe chose among the different options. So everyone has to say Akaras Atev, though it was mentioned. I want to also acknowledge Mr. Rabbi and Mrs. Goldman, of course, and Mrs. Leah Lipsky, Yibod L'chaim Tevim, from her husband, Eli, and all of you that are making this happen. And our biggest resource and our greatest gift, and I don't think you have to add one word to what the Rebbe said. We could analyze all these asias of what the power of a child is. And by the Rebbe was a nachas ruach, that a child didn't just hold his hand, but also used his kapota to wipe his sweat. And if you read it closely, it's like saying halavai, all the gdelim would do the same thing. Many people use the Rebbe for all kinds of different things, but what the Rebbe considers nachas ruach is to use him to wipe our sweat, which means to comfort us and to give us strength and to be able to forge ahead in these last minutes that the Rebbe gave us the job to do and bring the Geula. But especially today, I don't like to use the word crisis, even though the Rebbe did use the word crisis, but we always like to focus on the positive. There is a crisis among our youth and among our children. And we all know that it's infinitely easier to bring up a healthy child than it is to fix a broken adult. So for 1 hour you spend with a child, you accomplish, I don't know how many hours that you would have to work with this adult that was neglected as a child. So I want to talk about that, obviously from the perspective of the Rebbe, using this note as an anchor. Many things are very obvious and are known, but it still doesn't mean that we don't talk about it. But above all, in a practical way, what we all can do more than we've been doing. Because obviously sitting here, especially the rave of the majority of people here are keres habayis and mothers who are meis nefesh every day, grandmothers as well, and meis nefesh every day for the chinuch of their children. That's not even a question. So I'm not here to, if anything, I'm humbled before you. But nevertheless, as we all know, if good is better is better. If good is better, not better. And the Rebbe would demand of us to do even more. Literally, Hashgacha Pratis this morning, someone forwarded me an email. A shlucha, I know the name, but I'm not going to mention the name. A shlucha who says we live in a place where our children have really exposure to nothing of Yiddishkeit except what we give them. And as soon as they go out to the street or they go to a store, there's no community. So the only place we look forward to is to summer camp. Because then, at least for 2 months, our children go to a camp and are surrounded in the ruach and the spirit that we want. And it has a tremendous impact, as the Rebbe speaks so often about the impact of a camp, even more than school, because it's a 24/7 all immersion experience. And she said, so to my chagrin, we submitted, and the camp rejected my child. So the email wasn't addressed to me, it was addressed to someone else who's forwarding it to me. And what am I supposed to do? Now maybe I should someone can talk to me afterwards and tell me who I should direct this person to. And it's not money even. The camp is full. What do you think the Rebbe would answer to such a letter? And this is in our community. And I'm not saying this, Chaz v'Shalom, not Lashon Hara. The question is, this is a physical, real, practical story. And how many of our children, even going to camp and schools and so-called in our environments, have other neglects that we are missing? I have no question, if the Rebbe wrote such a note, it wasn't just to soothe this woman that she should know, don't be aggravated. It's a note now, it's part of the Rebbe's Torah. It's nitzchi. It means the Rebbe saw very clearly that there's a need, for the Rebbe and for all of us, to allow children to wipe their sweat on our kapotas and to hold our hands. And if you think about it, just as Jacobson again, the year before was Tov Shalom at Zion, when the reason we're here began. This is a year afterwards. A year before that was Tov Shalom at Vov, 1976, and the Rebbe declared that the year Shnas HaChinuch, and the Rebbe, that's when the Rebbe established Mivtza Chinuch, all in this period, all 40 years ago basically, 40, 41, 39. And when did the Rebbe establish Tzivus Hashem? In Tov Shemem, just 2 years later. Now, Rebbe establishes things, obviously we all accept it, and it must be an important thing. But it doesn't take a lot of imagination to figure that the Rebbe Magdim Refuah Lamaka was preempting challenges that were coming. Just like when the Rebbe established Neshei B'nai Chabad in the early 50s, and the feminist movement wasn't even born yet, wasn't even conceived yet. Understanding the importance of women being leaders in their own right, in their way, in every Jewish community. So there's no question that Tzivus Hashem, the Shnas HaChinuch, the emphasis on this was not just another campaign. It was the Rebbe seeing, as a visionary, as a Rebbe is, what are the challenges and the needs. And today, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand what the Rebbe was attempting to do. They were Mezdis Chinuch, education, Al Yiddish Hashem, and Taras HaKedesh. The Rebbe still felt the need to make Tzivus Hashem, and it was not just for children that didn't go to Jewish schools. It was very clear that it was for everyone. The Rebbe said it, emphasized it. I just heard today a story. You bring everything in together, why not? So in days of Russia, Samarkand, so when they had sometimes questions, there was no way to get a direct question to the Rebbe, so they waited for a shliach who would come to Russia and then send a note, and it had to be all subterfuge. You couldn't write Dear Rebbe, so they wrote Dear Zayda, or Dear Uncle. And they had a dilemma because there was, in that point in Samarkand, a bunch of Bukhara children had come to the community. And the question they had was, where should they spend their resources? Should they get involved with them or focus mostly on the Anash and their own families? So they wrote a letter like this to the Rebbe. They wrote, Dear Zayda, in Yiddish, we have a dilemma whether we should buy the white shoes or the black shoes. That's how they put it. Or the dark shoes. The Rebbe, of course, understood the message very clearly, and the answer came back that the grandfather is answering, there's no difference between dark shoes and light shoes. So they understood what they have to do. Which is no surprise, but it's interesting how it was phrased. Talking about Rabbi Lipscroll of Ashalom. Story I heard from him actually a few months before his passing. But I'm sure the family knows the story better than I, so I hope I say it over exactly correctly. And some of you may have heard the story. He was a Bacher in 770. He came from Eretz Yisrael. Actually, he's my mother's first cousin. So it was Leibel Lipsker, was his father. My grandfather was Yankel Lipsker. They were brothers. And he had come from Eretz Yisrael, I'm not sure what year, 62, 61, maybe earlier. Earlier? Okay. So I don't know exactly what year it was, But being that he was musically inclined, so he decided he's going to get some music lessons. 57, 58. Okay.
He made a stop in Paris.
When he arrived. Okay, got it. Yeah. Salangia, yeah. And he, so he decided to take, obviously he didn't announce it and didn't ask permission from the Anhola. And he went off to do his music. That was his passion. They got a wind of it, of David Raskin and the Anhola, and they had an emergency meeting. What do we do? This is like, remember, this is not the 21st century. This was in the early 60s, I believe. And they made a decision they're going to throw him out of yeshiva. Or maybe make an ultimatum. I'm not sure which one of those two. I think they said to throw out. Anyway, but David Raskin didn't do anything without writing to the Rebbe. So I guess in their weekly report or something like that from the Anhola, they wrote about the Bochim, and they wrote about one Bocher who is taking music lessons instead of, I don't know if he took her off from the Seder Yeshiva or it was in the evenings, but upon him it was not in the guidelines of Temchet Mimim. And their plan is to tell him to leave Yeshiva. The Rebbe called him in, Rabbi Raskin, I think also Rabbi Mentlik, if I recall correctly, and told him that Adarabbe, not only should they not throw him out, but they should offer to pay for his lessons. And not that the yeshiva was rolling the money exactly. And the Rebbe said these atheists, this is the way he told it to me, and I don't know if it's exact Lashon, correct me if I say it wrong. The Rebbe said, mit noch sehen wie viel Nachas or wie viel Pedes will nach Reis kommen von der chassidischen Negunim was wird spielen, or something of that nature. Is that more or less correct? Does anyone here know the exact Lashon? That was what I heard from Rabbi Lipsker. He told it to me upstairs in 770, I would say around 4 months before his own passing. I may have even asked, no, I think he told it to me. I may have asked him, but I think he told it to me on his own. Anyway, listen to that story. So what happened? Let me tell you the end of the story. So Rabbi Raskin called him in, and he thought, okay, he's going to get now the riot act. He's going to be, told that they caught him. And Rabbi Raskin tells him, where you been going, like in these different times? So he didn't. He started saying. Then he told the truth. He says, I like music and I go to music lessons. He says, and who pays for it? So, what was he going to say? He says he scraps together here alone and there alone. And it's difficult. And he was absolutely convinced that this is it. Now he's also using money, etc. And Rabbi Raskin says to him that the yeshiva is going to pay for it. So you can imagine how shocked he was. Now, it's very obvious and clear, and I want to make it clear, that this doesn't mean that the Rebbe suddenly gave a license that everybody should go off and take all kinds of lessons. But it means that we have to understand the voice of a child and the voice of a student. And even though we may have a certain model and a certain way we think everybody has to fit in, this story, you don't need any more stories than this to tell you it doesn't work that way. And this was Temchet Mim. We're not talking about a child who was not interested in learning, and he's a troubled kid, and he's a younger child. You're talking about a Bocher 770. Basically an adult child that can be expected and told, there's Seder Yeshiva and there's no other things now. You want to play music when you get married, go figure out how to play music. So obviously, as I said, it's a hirah to this particular case, and we can't just make a blanket statement. But it is a hirah, and it teaches us much. Now, if you think about it, it's the pasuk, Chanech lanar al pi darkei, gam ki yaskin lo yosem imenu. And the Rebbe asked the question, what kind of darkei? What does that mean? Educate the child according to his way, which includes also her way. And that will ensure that even when the child grows older, will not waver and wander away from this path. Darkei, more than once I heard the Rebbe say, and the Rebbe ask, and with a wonder, what kind of darkei? There's only one derech, derech Hashem, derech HaTeirah v'Mitzvos. Since when is there another derech? What's even the Havamina darkei? And the Rebbe explained, among different times, he explained the following. Over. That there's two parts to Torah. There's the Torah min hashamayim, obviously that no person, no human being can change, can add or subtract. But then there's applying Torah and translating Torah in a language that every child and every student and every adult for that matter could understand. And in fact, there's another pasuk, which we all know very much, one of the Yud Beis Psukim, Maimore Chazal, and it's the pasuk that the whole Tanya is based on. As you all know, in Tov Shalom Advav, exactly this, again, this period in time, that's when the Rebbe came out this time of year. First the Shchedesh Iyar and then Lag Baimer that year, with the 12 Psukim Maimore Chazal, which is a study of its own, why the Rebbe chose Dafka these 12. And Karev Elecha Dover Mei, there's a pasuk from Chumash in Nitzavim, Pasha Nitzavim, where Moshe says that you may think that the Torah mitzvah is Recheka, it's distant, Me'ever Layam, across the wide sea, B'Shamayim, in heaven. So it says, no, Le Recheki, Le Be'ever Layam, Le B'Shamayim Hi, Ki, it's Karev Elecha Dover Mei, B'Ficha B'Vavcha La'asesei. And the Alter Rebbe wrote a whole Sefer Tanya, Levayir Eich, to explain how Karev. Moshe made the statement, but we need a whole Tanya to explain how. So when I was teaching in Beis Rivka a number of years ago, so I was teaching, so to speak, Tanya. Why do I say so to speak? Because we ended up learning a half a Perek a year. Still Tanya, but there were a lot of introductions and since I was writing Fabrengens, I was working in Sichas then, so I had the opportunity to write to the Rebbe. I didn't want to bother the Rebbe with many questions, so I wrote to the Rebbe that I'm teaching the Tanya, and I'm teaching it in a particular way. I want to know if the translation for the word Karev can be translated as relevant. Because Karev, if you look in the translations, most of them translate close. It's close to you, as opposed to distant. Now let's be honest, what means close? Close physical proximity, that the Aron Kodesh is right near you? So I asked the Rebbe if relevant is a better translation, and the Rebbe circled and made yes with a check. So I have the license to use that word. And it changes everything if you think about it. To make something relevant means alpi darke, that you understand the child or the student, whatever age, you understand their particular personality, their particular needs, and you don't have a cookie cutter model. So yes, the Torah is the same Torah for everybody, but the language and the temperament and the tone, and do you speak stronger, do you speak weaker, is very different. Very different. I heard a story that one of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maskirim secretary once saw Iyar the Masmid was going into Yechidus, and the door was left open a bit, so he had the temptation, which he fulfilled, to listen in to the Yechidus of Iyar the Masmid and the Frierdiker Rebbe. And Rabbi the Masmid asked the Frierdiker Rebbe for three things. He wanted a tikkun on. The story I'm really telling is for the end of the story, but I might as well tell you the whole story because it's a Geshmaka story. The three things were, the Iyar Masmid, the first thing that he said was that when he goes to different cities to collect money for the Rebbe and for the yeshiva, so sometimes people ask him for brachas. So often he has the opportunity to send the bracha to the Rebbe, Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe would give an answer. But there are times that people need a bracha right away, so he gives a bracha. And he feels that they're giving him credit, and he feels really bad. He wants a tikkun because it's the Rebbe's keches, not his. So the Frierdiker Rebbe smiled and said to him, "Was hat dir, was trachten? We weet doch wann the bracha kommt." So let them think what they're thinking. But the bottom line is it solved the issue. That was number one. Number two, he gave a mashal in Chassidus for Aspaklaria Hameira. It's It's an expression in Chassidus talks about a transparent glass. That the nevuah of Moshe is like through a transparent glass, and by other neviim it's like through a spaklari she'eina me'ir. And he gave his own example that he never saw in Chassidus, and he wants a tikkun because you don't give your own examples. The Frierdiker Rebbe stood up and went to the shafa and brought out a sefer and showed him that the moshel is already used. He says, don't feel so proud. This moshel has already been used. The third thing was that he wouldn't eat meat unless he saw the sheikh shech the meat. One Friday he came late, close to Shabbos, and he didn't have an opportunity to see the sheikh shecht, so he didn't eat meat that Shabbos. But later he found out that the kugel that he did eat was mixed with the meat. So he said to the Frierdiker Rebbe, so maybe apparently it's a hidur that really doesn't belong to him. Because the fact that he was nichshel, that he fell through, means maybe he's being too frum, so to speak. So he wants to have from the Frierdiker Rebbe a heter, basically to stop having this hidur. And Frierdiker Rebbe said, on the contrary, the fact that it bothers you so, means it's beferish, yeah, hidur you should keep. Anyway, that was the first half. The real point I want to make is at the end. Frierdiker Rebbe says, so these three things resolved. As far as what I have a taina to you is, I hear that you're fabringing with Bochrim and Jungelite together. Meaning Bochrim students and Jungelite. And he says it's not a good thing to do. Why? Because Jungelite you have to speak with more delicate gloves. And with Bochrim you have to be sharper. Just an example. Now I know you could say maybe is that consistent with the Rabbi Lipska story? It's consistent because it all depends on the situation. The best preemptive medicine, and this is a fact, you could say this to anyone, whether it's people who grew up in a Chassidish environment or in a secular environment, is healthy children. Frankly, if you think about it, I was once talking to a sociologist, a secular sociologist, and I said to him, what's the sign of a healthy society? What are the barometer, the criteria for a healthy society? So he said, standard of living, life insurance, health insurance, life expectancy, and the standard of medicine, more or less. I said, and based on that, our generation is the healthiest society ever, because in all those levels we're better than any generation before. Now, of course, this was a loaded question. I wanted him to ask me what the Torah says is a healthy society, and he asked me. I said only one thing: the welfare of our children and our homes and families. You know, I saw he was taken aback a bit, and then he said to me, well, based on that, we may be the worst society. You know, we don't really know about other generations. So, you know, the contrast. We live in a very comfortable world. Baruch Hashem. We don't have any of the xeris and the persecutions. And oddly and ironically, in this time we have the greatest challenge internally. Because comfort zones are not necessarily good for having a sense of urgency and a sense of focus. So I have talked to many teenagers and young people in our community and outside of our community, and there's a certain common denominator which may not surprise you. And if you ask somebody, okay, so why do you think you're here in this world? Very few young people could answer this question. To be honest, very few older people could also answer this question. Now I know it's easy to say, and I'm sure everybody here was educated to say, we came down to this world to make a dira b'tachtenim. Anyone learns Tanya Perek Lamed Vav, the Sava Kodesh Baruch Hu Yisrael dira b'tachtenim. That's the purpose. If you're a little more, if you want more Chassidish Asis, is to fulfill the Rebbe's Ratzon, to fulfill the ultimate Ratzon, to bring Mashiach, or the words of Mashiach to the Baal Shem Tov, your futzamayna secha chutza. It's all correct. But the question that we have to ask ourselves: can we and our children and our students and anyone we come in contact with translate what I just said al pi darkei, chanechel na al pi darkei? What does your futzamayna secha chutza mean to you that's different than to me? We understand the generic global purpose. We've been told. That has been given to us. We don't have to work on that. The challenge is, how do you make it yours? How do you own it? That's a whole different story. The sad thing is that we have the Asius. We have it. but the application. And frankly, the real test of success is if not what you think you've achieved, whether our children, and as they grow into adults, have an answer. Not just an answer, but an answer that's exciting and passionate to them. So I look back to the settle of the Rebbe. He says, "Ein l'shayir geidla levavius hapashtus hatmimus amitis shel yeled." You want to see the best version of who we are, we have to look at our children. I know in technology they say a iOS, a smartphone 5 is better than a smartphone 4. If you don't know what that is, Tova Elechem Bracha, it's fine. Like the Rebbe sometimes by Fabrengen, he says in the Times, in the New York Times, and then he would say, Tova Elechem Bracha. You know. So technology, the better, the later the version, the better it is. You can say with human beings, I think it's the other way around. Version 1.0, meaning as the child emerges from the mother's womb with Kol HaTeirah, learning everything, is better than any school, and with all respect to all our mezdos, than we'll ever create, because the Malach himself teaches the whole Teirah to every child. And from then it's basically downhill, if I could put it that way. Now downhill, I don't mean Chaz v'Shalom in a bad way, that's what Hashem wants. We forget consciously what the Teirah was taught to us in the mother's womb. The Alter Rebbe says clearly in Kut Teirah, why are we made to forget? We're made to forget because we have to put our Yegiah, our effort, to reclaim it. But it's not really forgotten. It remains embedded in our superconscious, unconscious, subconscious, however you want to put it. In language of Chassidus, in our Meiches Temah, in our hidden part of our minds. And that's why when you hear a person Teirah that resonates. What means resonates? It like rings true. Like it's like you heard a truth that you once knew. Where do you know it from? You know it because you were taught it. Which means truth doesn't have to be taught, it's inside us. And the job of parents and educators is like a gardener, like the Rebbe often says of Abbas Legani. A gardener does not create flowers. A garden does not create trees. A gardener makes sure to tend to the garden, both surmarav aseitev, to weed the garden, make sure there's no negative influences so things can grow, and to water and nurture the seeds that are there so it will grow properly and blossom into the proper plant or tree or shrub or whatever it has to become. A gardener is a caretaker. You may have heard the story, Rabbi Shmuel tells it with his name, so I could say it in his name. He said he suffered from a temper. And unfortunately, once in a while, he would hit his children. And he asked the Rebbe what to do about it. Obviously, he knew the Rebbe's shita about not hitting children, especially coming from anger. It wasn't due to because he was such a big Yireh Shamayim and he wanted to make sure children are disciplined. He lost it. You know, he had a short temper and short fuse and he lost it.
He also had 17 kids.
Huh?
He also had 17 kids.
He also had 17 kids, I'm reminded. Well, with all respect, so does my sister-in-law, and she never touched her children. I don't think it's a number thing, by the way, because I know people with one child and they're pretty aggressive and violent. You know. Yeah. I think Chaim Meir, walked in here. He'll correct me. I don't think he even can touch a fly. But okay. I'm not trying to justify or criticize him. I'm telling you a story that happened with him and the Rebbe. You know what the Rebbe's answer to him was? You have to think to yourself that it's not your child, it's Hashem's child, he's a partner with you. And how could you strike a child of Hashem? Think about that. Now we all know, we know that Hashem gives the neshama. And what's in a body without a neshama? But if you carry it all the way through, it comes down to this. A child enters in your realm, whether you gave birth to this child, or it's a child that is under your tutelage and education, or it's a child that you just meet. How do you look at this child? Well, let's look at the eyes of the Rebbe. Gedel Levavius, Pashtus, Tmimus, Va'amitis, Bechesed Nu'erayich, as God's child. I remember it was a Purim, I think it was Friday that year, and they read the Megillah in 770. And as you all know, when it comes to Haman and banging Haman, the children are all well armed with their arsenals, and they make a racket. Today, I don't know what level it's gotten, but then it was little pistol guns and then the cap guns and all the different stuff. And the bleachers. And they waited the whole year for this moment. So that year, I guess it was a racket more than usual, and they started knocking and knocking. It was already, and some of the adults, including the Gabbai, started yelling at them to Kinder, seid still, stop, be quiet. And to the point where the parents, and they started to kick you out of here and all that. The Rebbe was standing in the front corner of his place, the corner in 770, and so to speak, oblivious to what's going on. But that next Shabbos, the Rebbe spoke, he said, it happened to be, it happened to be, I was in Shul Purim by the reading of the Megillah, and I heard that when it came to Klappen, or whatever the Rebbe put it, and the children went with the ganze Trask, and he heard people saying that the children should be quiet and leave the shul. The Rebbe said, I was thinking to myself that maybe the other way around, maybe the adults should leave the shul. And the Rebbe cited a medrash. I believe the year was Tov Shalom Ates as well, the same period actually, now that I think about it. I have to check that. And the Rebbe cited a medrash. It says in the Pasuk, Dilugei Alai Ava, from Shir HaShirim, which means that love consumed me. It's like jumped all over me. Dilug, from the word dilug. So love consumed me. That's the pasuk. The Medrash comes and teaches it like this. What does Dilug Alai Ava mean? That when little children start playing, so they play and they schlep out the Askaris. Askaris are Torah scrolls, holy names, from Aron Kodesh, and they don't know what it is, so they throw it on the ground, and they start jumping on it like you jump on things. So we all know that's like an ultimate desecration, even if it happens by accident. And the Eibishter says, however, Dilug Alai Ava, jump on me more and more because you're doing it with love. Because the Eibishter sees the children are jumping on him. It's a Sefer Torah, it's the Eibishter. And whether it's the kavanah of the children is not relevant here. But that's where it's coming from, because they're not doing this to desecrate, God forbid. This is a medrash, quoted by the Rebbe. So a few years ago, I remember, I deal with different types of people, and sometimes you learn the most, actually. Talmidei Yesem Mekulim, you learn from your students, and you learn most, sometimes, from the people that are least exposed to Yiddishkeit and Chassidishkeit. Because sometimes that's how it is, the eclipse of the sun, when things are darker, you sometimes appreciate the light more. And a few weeks before Rosh Hashanah, I get an email from someone who's coming to my classes over many years. She now lives in a different city. And she says to me, I just discovered a childhood picture of myself. And she attached a little girl, 3 years old maybe. Now just for a little background, she did not know she was Jewish till she was 9 years old because her parents hid it from her. They didn't want her to be burdened by it, they hid it from her. But she always gravitated Yom Kippur to go to shul. She knew something was going on, she had a sense. And she grew up in a very wealthy and successful home. But as she put it to me, it was a palace, but it was a cage. It was loveless. I never saw my mother, I never saw my father. I'm not going to get into all the gory details, but she sends me this picture of herself as a child, and she writes these words. What happened to this child? Here you see such a bubbly face, innocent, pure. What happened to this child? I don't know, for some reason it gripped me. And literally, like a week or two later, I was speaking somewhere. I was speaking about children, I was speaking about the new year, achlotis. So a mother came over to me, and then another two mothers came over, and they said, we read your emails. Maybe you can make a suggestion, something we can do this year. It's extra for our children. Besides everything we do. It's like a strange request. I said, you're asking me? You're mothers. I wasn't the greatest father. You could ask my children. So I don't think you should be asking me this question. Well, you can call my wife if you like. But anyway, they asked me. So I look at it like, it's not about me. I'll figure out what would the Rebbe say. That's what it comes down to. So I thought about it, and I wrote up then a few suggestions article, and it was all inspired by that woman's note about what happened to this child. And it's based on a very basic principle that the Rebbe said again and again and again, which may be, and I say only maybe the greatest and most important statement that we could say to each other and to our children and to everyone. And I put it in the chapter in Torah Meaning for Life as a title in the quote from the Rebbe on the chapter on birth. So we all know the Rebbe instituted the idea of birthdays on Tov Mem Ches, right after the Rebbetzins Stalkus. So her birthday is Chafei Adar, and that Chafei Adar, which is also the birthday of the world, according to one opinion, the Rebbe then instituted, even though birthdays were already, the Rebbe encouraged, but it wasn't official. It became official in 1988, and that week when the birthdays were announced, so the Rebbe was Magi the Sikha, but he also was Magi, he edited a short page announcement about this new campaign, so-called, to celebrate birthdays. And when he edited it, in Yiddish, he added a line. It says, Geburts, the day of your birthday, is the tog, then se hepsuch an dein Zayin. That's what the Rebbe wrote. Is the day that your being began. The Rebbe's words in Yiddish. And he added it. It said, the Geburts is the day when you're born. The tog von dein Zayin. And it reminded me so often the Rebbe saying the posuk, also another posuk, Maaseh Yodeh Lispar Amachum Tzadikim, and Maaseh Yodeh Lispar, you're my handiwork that I am proud of. So when I wrote Torah Meaning for Life, I translated into English. It was the best way I could find a translation. I wrote, birth is God saying you matter. And it became very popular. And I always I say this is the Rebbe's statement that he said so often, to children, to everyone for that matter. And I remember once by Fabringen, the Rebbe looked around actually and said, everyone here and everyone in this world has a mission to accomplish that you and only you can accomplish. And if you don't do the job, no one else will. Not Moshe Rabbeinu and not the Rabbeim and not those that live before us and not those that will come afterwards. Everyone has something unique and indispensable. But the Rebbe, this was one of the foundations. And I say maybe the foundation, because if you don't matter, everything you do doesn't really matter. Like someone will say to you, okay, you know what, come tomorrow morning, we need a volunteer. We're going in the morning to visit a hospital, we're going to visit the sick or something like that. Okay. And you say, what time? 6 o'clock in the morning? Are you sure you need me? And you say, you know what, if you can't do it, fine, don't come. How many people are going to be motivated to go? But if someone says to you, we can't do it without you, and if you don't come, it's not going to get done, it's a different story. If you don't have that sense of urgency and that sense that it's not optional or arbitrary, then we all will relax. If you think of all the sikhs of the Rebbe, it's not even the details. It was the sense of urgency that you have to do something, and now and not tomorrow. Now, if you think about it psychologically, when children are infused with that sense, you tell me if there's a better preventive medicine. If they have a sense that I'm needed and something can't get done a positive way without me, then they're not just sitting around, I'm bored, what am I going to do? So that's what I wrote that before that Rosh Hashanah, based on these stories that I mentioned. I wrote that maybe a good suggestion, just a suggestion, besides telling your children every morning, I love you, and before they go to sleep the same, maybe add one more thing, something like this. And this is paraphrasing the Rebbe. You're the greatest gift that God sent to this world. And I'm blessed to be given the honor to be your caretaker, to be your gardener. And I will do everything in my power to make sure that you actualize the neshama, the keiches, the abilities, the shlichus that you were given. That's my biggest blessing. Guarantee you say this every morning to your children. I mean, heartfelt, not just some mechanical. And at night, what do you think will happen? Day after day after day. This is like just like you give vitamins. Just like children, everybody needs physical food, we need spiritual food. Now I know spiritual food, of course, Torah and mitzvahs. But we're talking the chanech lanar apidar kei, the specific, that the child should feel it's me. It's not just the collective. We're all doing it. So I made the suggestion. I can tell you what happened a year later. I got quite a few emails, more than one, probably a few hundred, but especially one that really was memorable that I remember. I said, I've been doing what you suggested, and it's changed our entire life at home. Because my children started asking, what does this mean? And then my husband started asking, what does it mean? And I started, and we started wondering, what does it mean? And you start thinking about it. So what's unique? What is it unique about you? What did the Rebbe see in El Lipsker, Ol Vasholem, when he told the school to pay? He saw the potential of a child, of a young man, I should say, that could have been put to rest right there and closed down, or allow him to blossom and use his chushim to bring Chassidishkeit, the Chassidish music to the world in his way. The Apidarke. So it's just one story. I'm sure there's hundreds with the Rebbe. I don't know them all. We all don't know them all. But it comes down to that attitude. And this can be explained to anyone. I've said this to psychologists, child psychologists, even completely people who are secular who may not even want to use the word God. I said, if you don't have that sense of purpose, I'm not saying, God forbid, the Eibishter could bless us, and even if you don't have it, you'll still be blessed, that everything will be good in life. But without it, with it, you have the single most important ingredient that is required for a person to feel that they're needed, that they're important, self-esteem. And I don't mean arrogance, self-esteem. And essentially what the Mishnah says, Chayev Adam Leimer B'Shvili Nivrei Elo. Not in an arrogant way, responsible way. What the Rebbe taught us to be, we're not bystanders. I don't know if I shared this story. I remember when I was the year of my bar mitzvah, Tov Shel Lamed, and it was Simchas Torah. So that year, my birthday was a little later after Tishrei, Hey Tevis to be exact. Right, Ma?
Wow.
Yeah. And I was, by that point, a few months before your bar mitzvah, you start putting on film, and then they buy you a big hat that goes on your head, and you think you're like king. You're an adult. So that's what happened that year. And the children, if you remember, or if you know, Simchas Torah, the children who were in the community would be sitting under the tables where the Rebbe would dance the Hakofe, first and seventh Hakofe. Tables, it wasn't even tables then, it was milk cartons. So we never made it to the seventh Hakofe. But the first Hakofe, we were down there and the Rebbe would bend down with the Sefer Torah. It was very special, children. And the Rebbe gave us a little attention. But Tov Shel Lamed, I'm now a big bocher. Not sitting anymore under milk cartons. And I got a big hat to protect. So I had a bunch of uncles, thank God. So I had protection. So I got myself, with one of my uncles, a place in one of the bleachers. This was still 770, was then, I think, that wasn't the largest, it was maybe the first expansion. I don't remember, I'm not sure. I think so. And I was standing in the bleacher, I remember near the Oren Keders, my uncle all proud. The Hakofe, first Hakofe ends. My father used to be hanging around there, and the Rebbe would always give him brachas. And then the Rebbe says to him, where's your son? So he points proudly, there he is, in the bleachers there, and there I am, beaming, like a 13-year-old fool. Chochem. So the Rebbe smiles and says, "Fleck doch tanzen mit uns doch, bei der Koffe." Then the Rebbe said these devastating words, which changed my life forever, I think. The Rebbe said, "And schon geworden a spectator." He already also became a spectator. Now, I understand the Rebbe was not trying to dismiss everybody in shul who's standing in bleachers, but that's the Rebbe's word, spectator. So I guess maybe the Rebbe planted a seed in me that I should never be a spectator again. So I became a disruptor and a little troublemaker here and there. And I apologize if I've offended anybody. Might as well use this opportunity. Maybe I don't apologize. They say some people's business card says they make happy people miserable and miserable people happy. So the point is that the Rebbe did not want spectators, did not want bystanders. And everybody knows the Shimshon stock story with the baseball game. You do or you don't? Okay, so I'll tell it. Anyway, he used to have a shir for some reason every 15 minutes, a half hour, Motzei Shabbos with the Rebbe. Before the Rebbe was Rebbe, it was called Ramash, 770. And one Motzei Shabbos, the Rebbe comes and he's nowhere to be found. The Rebbe's looking around, goes out on the porch. Shimshon is running to the subway station. The Rebbe calls him, he says, where are you going? We have a shir tell. So he says, Rebbe, today, Rabbi, a very important thing, I can't stay. The Rebbe says, what could be more important than learning Torah? He says, trust me, it's more important, but I can't tell you what it is. You know? So the Rebbe said, it's not fair. At least I have the right to tell me what it is, because it is my time. I designated the time for you. So he said, okay, the Brooklyn Dodgers are playing the New York Yankees. Now, you may know that Ebbets Field, Crown Heights is now going through gentrification. Maybe they'll come back. But Ebbets Field was Brooklyn Dodger Stadium on Bedford Avenue and Crown Street. Before my time, I think they moved in 1956 to Los Angeles. Okay? And the New York Yankees were in the Bronx. So this was called the Subway Series. And it was a special thing, the rivalries. And the Rebbe referred to it a number of times. So he had to go to this game. Anyway, the Rebbe tells him these memorable words. The Rebbe says, so tell me, how much are you paying for this... for these seats? So what was it then, 1947, maybe 8 cents? 12 cents, fine. Okay. And the Rebbe said, and for this honor of paying 12 cents, what do you get? You know, so he said, we get to watch the game and watch how the players play the game, yeah. As a matter of fact, Rabbi, he says, if you want, I can get an extra ticket. Which the Rebbe rejected, obviously. So the Rebbe said, but I'll make you a better offer. The offer is like this. I'm offering you, without any cost, to be a player in the game and not to watch the game. Anyway, he didn't accept the offer. And when I checked with him the story, because I wanted to write it and use it, he said to me with almost tears in his eyes, he said, and you know, it's 50 years later, whatever it was, and I'm still watching the game. Still not a player. I think it was Dr. Velvel Green, Professor Velvel Green, Olav Shalom, also the first, he spoke at one of the Keynote HaShluchim, in the beginning, one of the first Keynote HaShluchim, and he said something very interesting. He says, I'm not a shliach, not the son of a shliach, but I'll tell you a story, an analogy. He says there was this guy who was training in the military, he wanted to become a paratrooper. So you train, you go up there in these planes, and you watch others prepare themselves and pack on their parachutes, and he helped out. And after a month of watching and observing, it's now your turn. So he was all excited. They pack on the parachute. He gets in line. He gets close. He looks down. 30,000 feet down. No, I'm not jumping. Okay. So they understood. Fine, you need another month of training to get the courage. So another month passes. Same thing. He goes, all excited. No, I can't jump. I'm afraid to jump. So the lieutenant there, whatever, the sergeant tells him, listen, it's clearly not for you. You're not made for this. Sign up in another part of the military, which you'll feel comfortable with. He says, no, I really like it here. I'll help make sandwiches, and I'll help pack on, and I'll help them. I'll help everything. You know, you need an assistant. So he says, why do you want to be here? You're never going to jump. He says, I'll never jump, but I like to be around people who jump. You know? So Velvel Green said, not a shliach, but I like to be around shluch. Okay? Now, obviously, that's not the kavanah. Just wanted to share that story. So let's take it back to our issues here. Obviously, this is not a place, and we don't have the time and the mindset right now, and I don't know if it should even be done in a large group, to sit down and really hammer out and figure out a game plan, how to best preempt challenges on one end, and also deal with challenges once they're there with our children. And I'd say children from 2 years old or 20 years old or 30 years old. We always remain children. And it deserves that, because I don't know if there's a more important thing that we can do. Because if you want to think about it from that sociological point of view, let's be honest. We can be as successful as we like to be in every area of Torah and mitzvahs and chassidus. And if our children, however, are left bereft and they're unable to fulfill their shlichus, would we call ourselves a success? The most important thing is the defenseless, vulnerable, pshitis, tmimus, amitis, levavius. What happens to that? What happens to that in our children? They start becoming like us. And again, I'm not criticizing us, but we don't have this pshitis. We are more skeptical, a little more cynical. We have disappointments. That's why it's so critical to learn from our children rather than them learning from us. To be honest, that would be much healthier. Yes, we have to be the gardeners. You can't expect them to know what it says in the Torah, but they have it instinctively, and naturally, children are far closer to Hashem than anyone is. Except it's natural. They don't yet have the maturity to articulate it. The Rebbe said a number of times when he was asked why he spends so much time with the children, he says because they're closer to the truth than adults. And he wishes he could spend more time. Now this is not to dismiss adulthood, it's not to dismiss rabbis or scholars and Rosh Yeshivas and teachers and mashpiyim and mashpiyas and all and shluchim and shluchim. Obviously not. It's to appreciate the most precious commodity. And I go back to the Rebbe's aces, the tmimus, the pshitus. Chassidus says the pshitus of a young child or of a ish pasha touches the pshitus of atzmus. And sophistication of adults and our minds and our emotions and all our developed faculties is only what Chassidus calls giluyim. Etzem. You want etzem, you go to a child. Now obviously the goal in life is to connect the etzem and the giluyim, so to speak. But never to compromise the etzem. In the last sikha, Simchas Torah Le'esata, the Rebbe spoke to us, Tavshinun Beis. Read that sikha. It's muge, edited in Sefer HaSichos Tavshinun Beis. It's all about children. And the Rebbe brings the posuk and the Maimar Chazal, Al Tigui B'Mishiche. The Gemara says that everyone is responsible to build the Beis HaMikdash, including the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, except Tenekesh al Beis Rabbo. So it's a strange thing. What's more important than the Beis HaMikdash? Mashiach itself. So the Gemara says, because the children are Mashiach, that means their learning is equivalent of us building a Beis HaMikdash. So Al Tigui B'Mishiche, don't touch the children. Don't touch them even with the grace of Giluyim, because they are naturally inclined and connected to what Mashiach is, what the Atzmus wants, and what the Eibishter wants of us. So I think we need a little re-education perhaps, or revisiting what the beauty and the lakus that is in every child that comes our way. So what can I say? When you have a Keren that, I don't know the exact number, 7,800 and something, right? Oh, 7,828 to be exact. In honor of Avrohom Eliezer, Avremi, as I hear him being called. So that speaks for itself. And the lesson to each of us is, both in our own families, our own homes, and of course every child. There's no child that is not one of our children. Is exactly what the Rebbe told us to do. This is the future, the present. And yes, Mashiach is any second. But we still have to do what we have to do. We can't say, you know what, Mashiach will save the whole thing. That's not the Rebbe's mandate to us. And I want to conclude the story I read. I'm sure the family knows it, but it's with Avrohom Eliezer. I remember I was 20 years old that night, that fateful Sunday night. We all remember those that were in the community. And he was on the telephone on Montgomery and Troy. And one of his friends was there. My brother-in-law was his classmate, Bertel Gansberg, as was Shmulik Napastik, who I think was standing near him when it happened, if I recall. And you know why he was on the phone? You probably know. So he was calling someone he knew from Iftzayim that he was putting film on. And he told him that he had a baby girl. He's going to have his wife is about to have a child. And he was convincing him to give the child a Hebrew name. So he was calling him that night to remind him to go make sure that when that happens, to give a Hebrew name. That was what he was on the phone for. Don't ask me God's mysterious ways, how that works exactly. Shluchim mitzvah are not supposed to be nizokin. He wasn't on the phone for any other reason. And as I hear, this was his personality. That's why he was on the phone. The Rebbe's mitzvah, film. Or mitzvah in this case, giving the child a name, Hebrew name. Okay. And then happened what happened. I think it was 32 years later that Mrs. Goldman receives a telephone call from a woman in Israel, I believe. And she says she couldn't muster up the courage to call her till now. Her name is Pesha Ziv, something like that. Pesha, first name. And she says, I am the girl, the child that was born to my father, who your son was calling to give a Hebrew name. And they gave me the name Pesha. Now, we did not grow up it wasn't a religious home, but because I had a Hebrew name, I began to explore what that meant through my years. And today I am a full Shem B'Torah mitzvahs that came from that. I think a year later, this Pesha gave birth to a son, and she named him Avrohom Eliezer. Yeah. So you talk about the power of children, power of a name. Who would think a name? I mean, when he made that phone call, I do not think he understood necessarily the whole power of a name. He did what the Rebbe told him to do as a soldier. I don't know, there's no real words to really capture. The Rebbe told Rabbi Lu, this is the Eibishter Zakind. And if you saw the Rebbe by Lag B'Omer parades, where are the best pictures of the Rebbe? Where is the glow, the shine, the majesty? Lag B'Omer parades, something the Rebbe instituted back early. I think the first parade was actually, I put in one in Tavshin Dalet. And later Lag B'Omer, the Rebbe coming out. And we all saw it in different years. The Rebbe saw in children what a Rebbe sees, Elokus, Meshiche. Whether we have those eyes, probably not, but we have, thank God, a Rebbe that does have such eyes. What we are expected to do is look through the Rebbe's eyes at our children. And yes, children can sometimes be annoying, we understand. And children can also sometimes jump on things. But the Eibishter, the Rebbe sees, he sees a child jumping, it's jumping with love. And it makes you smile. I remember when we made trouble in my grandmother's house, Taiba Lipska, my mother's mother, I always remember this expression because I was a particularly big troublemaker and so were my cousins. I mean, it was Lebedik there. And I remember once I came into the house and my grandmother looked at me and she saw already I'm up to something. She says, Nocha Tog Yontif, you know? And I never forgot it. So I said, Nocha Tog Yontif, I was about to make trouble. What do you call me, a Tog Yontif? That's the Jewish way you look at things. Other people would say another Ich weiß was, calamity, God forbid. And Nocha Tog Yontif, that's a Yiddish Ishprach. Nocha Tog Chanukah, those expressions. That's how we have to look. And I have no doubt that the best, as I said, the best defense is offense. You infuse your children with that type of commitment and the belief in them that they have something to accomplish. And yes, if it's music lessons, that may be that. And if it's a different type of outlet, another outlet. Darke. No one size fits all. Every mother knows that. Every father knows that. And it's the same Torah. We're not talking about compromising one iota of Torah. It's just the question how it's channeled. So there's no question that will be fulfilled what the Rebbe said, that Simchas Torah, Al Tiga B'Mashiach. Our Mashiach are right here with us, the children. They're already called Mashiach. Begashmius, not just Beruchnius. So if we cultivate in them and make sure that their Amunah shines, so it will be V'heshiv Leivavos Albanim, that it will give us the proper Amunah, because we all know for children we do anything. And the Eibishter says the Rebbe's Baracha should be Mekuyim, that with the children will march first. And also the inner child in each of us, which is somewhere there buried, hope not too buried, but somewhere there, will come alive, be able to march with the Rebbe, and with all the Rebbe's Chassidim and the Rebbe's Meisher Nefesh, who died on Kiddush Hashem, including Avrohom Eliezer, like the Rebbe said, when Yankel Kotarski passed away to his father, that Zicher that Het Yes Damayim Chassidus with the Rebbe. The Rebbe is with his people, with us as well. We should all be reunited. The Gula Mitzvah Shlema, take you from Iyar Mamsh.